our children are in our home, we have the wonderful opportunity to get to teach them about forgiveness and restitution and resolution when there's conflict in their life. Because honestly, that's just not how the real world works. Things aren't always perfectly fair. The whole Bible is full of modeling behavior, how to love one another, because it's the hardest thing to do. We are selfish creatures, and that is what we want to teach our children, is how to live out Christ in our homes so that we can then live it out in the world. Hi, I'm Natalie from the blog alegacyindays.com, and on this channel, I love to share with you guys encouraging tips and insights for how to live out your faith in your marriage, your parenting, and your home. Today, let's get into some tips that I have for you today, how we teach our children how to share and play together and foster loving sibling relationships. Our kiddos are best friends. They love playing together, but caveat is that does not mean our children are perfect or don't ever struggle with selfishness, covetousness, greed, all the general sinful tendencies that perpetuate sibling strife. That is something that we deal with in our home on a daily basis. But what I want to give you are some tools and some resources that you as a parent can apply to honor the Lord in this task of teaching your children how to honor Him in their relationships. And then that will give your children tools and resources how to handle conflict in their life and other relationships as they grow up. This is going to be an extremely valuable thing to learn in your home. It takes work, it takes time, and like I said, it takes intentionality, but the payoffs and the dividends are so rewarding and fruitful. So the first thing that I want to begin with is to just lay the groundwork that conflict is inevitable if you have children and sinners that live in your home. If you're a sinner and your children are sinners, which is everyone, there's going to be conflict. And we don't want to just manage behavior. We really want to teach biblical character. While our children are in our home, we have the wonderful opportunity to get to teach them about forgiveness and restitution and resolution when there's conflict in their life. The underlying current in our home is one of continuing fellowship. When fellowship is broken, it's usually because there's been a sin or an offense committed, and we want that restitution to come as soon as possible so that our children can have loving relationships. Conflict will come, arguments will come, but the basis should be a loving and unified relationship. Those are the tools that we want to give our children, is how to restore fellowship and make things right again when they've wronged someone or when they've been wronged. Not to just avoid conflict altogether. Conflict's gonna come. We want to give our children the tools for how to handle it. So first I want to talk about what that looks like in the toddler years. Toddler years, as I like to say, is for practice, practice, practice. The little guys don't know what they're doing is a sinful response. They have to learn that. They have to learn what the wrong behavior is, but more importantly, they need to learn what the correct positive behavior is. They don't know all the terms right now. They don't know that they're learning the fruits of the Spirit. They don't know necessarily that it's to honor the Lord, and we're going to teach that to them. And in the meantime, what you're giving them is little tools, and you can train them how to respond rightly. And what this does is it fosters relationships with their siblings that are positive. They will see and reap the fruit and the benefit of it immediately. They will see how they get a hug from their sibling, how the fellowship is restored. Little ones are made in the image of God, and they know immediately when something's off, and so they want things right too. They just don't know how to get it right. So we get to be there. We get to come and help show them and demonstrate that for them. And that is the fruit that they're going to reap. That's the reward that they're going to see, is they're going to see the benefit of having this loving relationship with their siblings restored again, or fellowship back with mommy and daddy, for example. So one of the ways that we teach our children when they're very young to play nicely is we have a very specific list of what we allow and don't allow in our home. It's not a comprehensive list, but we kind of have a list about proper principles of conduct and how we treat each other in the home. For our family with 7 boys, we have specific things. If you want to know what those are, you can head over to my corresponding blog post on this subject where I've listed those out. And I'd encourage you to do a similar thing for your home. Some of the things in our house, for example, are no hitting Ask first if you want a toy, if you want to play with a toy that belongs to another child or that they're maybe playing with. You need to ask them first. You need to accept no for an answer. And we touch kindly, we speak kindly, we ask forgiveness and make restitution if a wrong's been done, if something's stolen. And so in small ways, we can teach these principles to our young children by telling them what they've done wrong and then modeling for them the correct behavior and having them practice it immediately. Now, this takes extra time. Not only do we want to stop the behavior that's going on as parents, it's just, in the busyness of our lives, it's easy to just move along. Okay, they've stopped, let's move along and continue on with what we were doing. But if we can take the time and intentionality to actually teach them what they should have said and done in that situation, we don't have to give them all the background and all the whys in this season. We just want to model for them what they should have done. For example, if a child is hit, they need to make it right. They need to ask for forgiveness. They need to show how they can touch nicely. If they've grabbed something, we have them role play again how to hand it back kindly. And then ask to play with it. Have the sibling say, no, you may not play with it, I'm playing with it. And then have them find something else to play with, wait patiently, etc. The only time that we discipline is when a child refuses to be corrected. So we don't correct a child with discipline. We discipline when a child is rebelling against the correction, if that makes sense. I hope that's clear. We have 7 boys, so for our family we have to have some very clear lines about how to treat property and objects. Even still, things get destroyed just because boys are tough on stuff. But we have to not see that as malicious intention and sin. It's just part of them playing sometimes. So we need to get clarity on what are the sinful behaviors and tendencies in our family that we want to specifically address. So I would just encourage you, especially with your spouse, to get on the same page. Get clarity about the principles of conduct in your home. If we spend more time teaching and reinforcing the positive behavior in our home, then we will have less time that we need to spend correcting the negative behavior. One of the ways that we practice sharing in our home is that we have most of the toys that are accessible are for sharing. They're for everybody to play together. So we try to have a large quantity of them because we have a large quantity of little ones still in our home. And they all want to play together. We have magnet tiles and blocks, and I have a full list with links on my blog as well if you want to check out some of our favorite toys that the kids love to play together, Legos. So we try to have enough of them that they can all play together. We encourage them to play together. That is how I feel like the home should be, is about sharing, and we don't really want to contribute to the tendency that's already there to be selfish and to hoard and to lord over each other and to be greedy and divide things up evenly amongst everybody, because honestly, that's just not how the real world works. Things aren't always perfectly fair. And so we just want to encourage our kids that everyone should be having fun and playing together. And if that's not happening, something is off. Someone's being greedy, someone's hoarding, or being selfish. So sometimes a toy needs to be removed or a child needs to be removed. Sometimes a child is not playing kindly and is not being corrected well, and they just need to be removed and they don't get to play with everyone. Sometimes enough of a punishment in and of itself, because our kids really want to play with each other and they don't like having to go play alone for the most part. Another way that we encourage sharing in our home is by keeping the special toys that just really aren't good for little kind of destructive hands to be playing with in a special area in the child's bedroom. They have a special drawer or shelf where they keep those toys, and we encourage them to keep them in there. And if they're going to be playing with them, then they need to keep track of them, because if they get left out, then they're kind of free game for a while. If someone finds them and wants to play with them for a little bit, they can play with them, and then that child needs to put them back and show ownership, show stewardship, and so they need to go ahead and put their toys back. We just encourage them to have a limited amount of things that are special, and everything else is for everyone to play with and enjoy together. So if we've done our work in the early formative years, we've given them a lot of tools and resources. That doesn't mean that they are now free from greed and covetousness and selfishness. They really need to start turning that corner to independence and relying on their Heavenly Father for help as they get older. So that is a transition that we make with our children. But what we want to do is come alongside them and give them resources how to battle it themselves. where we want to teach them the biblical principles and more of the why for sharing. They memorize verses. They memorize these verses when they're young, but they don't understand the context as much. And when they're older, we remind them of these verses when they're struggling with a particular sin. We go over that with them, and so that they can apply that in their own life and lean on their Heavenly Father for help in these situations. And so it turns the corner from modeling the behavior, even though sometimes that's necessary, to spending more time engaging, working through their own process in their own mind of, what did you do wrong? What do you think you could have done right in this situation? What would God want you to do? Okay, how can we make restitution? How can we make this right? And asking them to think it through so that they can learn how to do that on their own. Obviously, as well as they get older, they have a little bit more spending money of their own to buy things and have more things that they have ownership of and stewardship for. And we still encourage our children to share those things because God has given us everything. And so none of it really is ours. We're stewards of everything. And so we really want our children to be able to share with their siblings, maybe in an observed way. They can let a little sibling play with a special model car, for example. And our older kids are really sweet about doing that. That doesn't mean they just need to let them run, willy-nilly around with their special toys or special art things or whatever. But we don't want them to ever think that what they have is just for their own private possession and it should never be allowed to be used by anyone else. If we have it, it's meant to be used to bless others with. So that is the principle we seek to apply. If you want to check out my blog again, I have some verses that are some of our favorites that we have our children memorize and work through with them. You can check out those links over on my blog, alegacyindays.com, with the blog post corresponding to the title of this video. When it comes to just fostering loving sibling relationships, I think it really begins with teaching children how to have short accounts with each other and confess sin right away, which we really try to apply early on, like I mentioned earlier in the video. And if that is happening, if the children are not piling up sins against one another, it really lends itself towards giving a foundation for a loving relationship and a fun relationship with each other, because they can just enjoy each other's company instead of having all this built up hurt and angst and feeling belittled by one another. Now, of course, honestly, our children aren't sinners. They belittle each other, they make fun of each other. We don't want there to be a tone between siblings of someone putting down someone or being condescending towards someone. Usually that is rooted in some other sin is going on. Maybe there's a little bit of jealousy, maybe there's some pride. And so that is what we need to address. When a relationship is off with our children, we know there is an underlying sin that needs to be addressed, and we try to get to the heart of that as soon as possible. But what we have found to be extremely helpful, if we cannot get to the root of it, is to just make them spend more time together. And one of the reasons why this works is because usually, inevitably, that sin ends up rising to the surface and becoming very clear and evident. We can deal with it at that point if it's a hidden sin. Otherwise, if it's just kind of a bad, stinky attitude, it gets worked out, because you have to learn to work together when you have to work together, right? You just make it work. Sometimes this shows up in simple ways, like a sibling not wanting to hold someone's hand during prayer time at dinner, for example. And we'll just make them hold hands longer. Like if they're making a big stink about it, it's like, well, now you get to hold hands for an extra minute. And it's funny how that works, because either the child realizes this is a really petty issue, it's not worth sitting here for another minute to 5 minutes holding their hand over this silly thing that I'm holding on to, or they have a bigger problem that can be addressed because it usually comes out. Like if it's like, you know what, you guys really aren't getting along very well today, I think you can do some dishes together. They have to work it out, or things just come up. I've had some really funny situations happen where a child will basically blurt out that thing that has been simmering down there, and it just all comes out, and it's like, great, now we can deal with it. Now we can address the problem that wasn't coming to the surface before. So I know it's counterintuitive, where you feel like these kids aren't getting along. Why would I make them spend more time together? They just need more time. They just need a break from each other. And it's not usually fruitful to do that. I think that really breeds more selfishness and resentment and whatever else is going on. Making them spend more time together, I think the reverse happened. In our home, we tell our children that they are each other's best friends, They love each other. We remind them of this when they're having a stinky attitude. Even if they're a little kid, we say, well, your brother loves you and you love him. That's why we need to be kind. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, you guys are each other's best friends. And they are each other's best friends now. And I think that's just been from trying to lay the groundwork of keeping the fellowship in place and restoring it when it's broken. Restoration of fellowship is, I think, the basis and the foundation for loving sibling relationships. Confession of sin, short accounts, and then they have all this room to just play and enjoy each other. And of course, that's going to breed fun, connection, and unity and relationship. They're going to be each other's best friends because they're not going to start out as enemies, right? And so we just don't give them the option. You guys are each other's friends, you're best friends, you got to learn to play together, and that's just how it's got to go in this home. And the fruit of that is very rewarding. All the work it takes is so worth it. I just want to encourage you now, as we have a daughter who is an adult and sons who are entering into adulthood, they choose to be together. They love each other's company, they spend time together, they go out for coffee together, they shop together, they ask each other opinions about things, and they're just truly each other's closest friends. And it's such a gift. I'm so thankful for that. And I know it's a gift from God, and I know it's by His grace alone. But that's because He's given us principles in His Word. The whole Bible is full of modeling behavior, how to love one another, because it's the hardest thing to do. We are selfish creatures. We are naturally covetous and greedy. And that is why we have so much of Scripture teaching us how to love one another. Because when we do that, we practically do that, we are living Christ in front of the world. And that is what we want to teach our children, is how to live out Christ in our homes so that we can then live it out in the world. How can we love the world if we do not love our brother? That's what Jesus says. And so I hope this video has helped you today. I hope that you have found some encouragement. Maybe if you're in the little years, that all that hard work you're doing now will pay off and be such a blessing to your children later in life, even for their adulthood. I mean, how many adults do you know that don't know how to handle conflict resolution? A lot of them. And it's not easy. Even as an adult, learning it when you're young, it's still hard. So give them the tools now. You're doing God's work, and I want to encourage you in that today. God will bless it, and He will bring the fruit. And so thanks for joining me here today, and I will see you in my next video.